White people fear black men. That's not fair, but it's true.
There was a real fear that if you let blacks get control, everything would change. And there was no, with some people, there was no idea that there would be any fairness or any democracy or anything, that there would be a decent, well-run city government, county government, whatever. It was like, if this happens, we're lost. And it was just a terrible fear.
Narrative of white people fear black people or white people are scared of black people, I think this is just a way of continuation of the white supremacy, because without fear there is no white supremacy. So white people has to fear black people and black people has to respect white people so that white supremacy can be supreme. I think that's how it is. White people fear black people because they fear they may lose their privilege if maybe black person become more powerful. They fear to lose some of the privileges. And of course they do. They do fear black people. And I get questions in my mind. Between white people and black people, who supposed to fear the other one? Because as far as I know, white people are all over the life of black people. All the suppression, discrimination, everything bad happening to black society, it is from, the white people. When I say white people, I don't mean all of the white people, but you understand what I'm trying to say, the white supremacy, and it's affecting each and every white man. All the white people, the white race are living off the back of white supremacy, all the back of white privilege. So in one way or the other, it's carrying all of them. So the video I'm going to react today is about white people sharing the fear they have to black race. I want you to watch these clips, because I just get questions. Why should white people fear black people? Let them tell us, and then we'll react.
I feel that a lot of the, we'll talk about police brutality. I feel a lot of white men are scared of black men because of their lack of exposure to black men or people of color. I'm not scared of black men. I'm not scared of Latino men. I've been around them my whole life, right? But I feel a white officer might be around a black guy and he feels that emotion. He's scared of the black guy. And next thing you know, the black guy runs, he's got to shoot him because he has the power, because he can pull it out of his pants and he shoots the guy. And I feel that happens over and over and over again, that white men are just scared or intimidated by black men for no other reason than that they're the color of their skin. And it's really the ignorance and the lack of exposure to those people.
Yeah, I find that interesting that the only thing that seems to scare white people are black men. Literally, they swim with the sharks. They hunt. They go in the mountains and hike with the bears. They go to safaris and hang out with the tigers and the lions. I mean, literally, they go into the ocean and they find these indescribable ocean beings.
They jump off a 1,000-foot cliff.
They jump off of cliffs. They skydive. I mean, literally, white people do everything you can imagine that would kill them. And the one thing that only scares them is black. And that's unfortunate, because our history as black people does not reflect in any way factually that we are a violent people. And I believe Minister Farrakhan said that the best when he said, we don't have a history of killing you.
When you watch the video of the black men killed by white cops in Louisiana and Minnesota, it brings us into a need for soul searching in the country. All the things Bill Clinton did and said, one of the profound things he ever said at the end of his administration was, on race, we have to get to the roots of black pain and the roots of white fear. Clinton, a white kid from the South, had seen everything. And white fear is that you walk down the street, like Barack Obama said about his white grandparents, and they're afraid because they have black men walking about 30 feet behind them. Black pain, you've been stopped for no reason while walking to the mall, or you've been asked by an usher at a basketball game to show your ticket when the 4 white friends from the office sitting next to you don't have the usher ask them for their tickets. That's black pain and white fear, and together you could see it with these cop incidents. The white cops in Minnesota and in Louisiana showed fear on their faces. In Minnesota, because the gentleman said he had a permit for a concealed carry, and when he went for his wallet, the cop shot him. And the cop was more unhinged than the African-American girlfriend, who remained calm. In Louisiana, somebody shouted he has a gun. You could see the white fear on the face of the cop as he pulled his gun out and shot him in the chest. Dick Gregory, who was an African-American comedian back in the early 60s, once said about racism in the North and South, there's racism in both places. In the South, you can get close to white people, but just don't get too big. In the North, you can get as big as you want, but just don't get too close. We still have racism in this country. We have to get to the roots of black pain and white fear, or more of these things will happen, and it'll keep happening.
White people fear black men. That's not fair, but it's true. What makes this even more unfair is that in the vast majority of cases, our fear of black men is in no way connected to our personal experience. And if that wasn't unfair enough, study after study has shown, you know this, that fear of black men doesn't even spring primarily from racism. It's deeper than that. And that's not fair to black people or white people. Most black men have experienced what some people refer to as the fearful gaze of white men and women. Then on the other side of the equation is this: the majority of African Americans in our country, they don't trust the criminal justice system, do you? I mean, you fear the police. That's not fair. Facts don't care. The white people who have all but silenced their fear of black men are the white people who have befriended black men or have been befriended by black men and their families. I've been to my share of far right-leaning churches and churches that lean far left. And it's so much easier for those pastors. I mean, everybody pretty much agrees on everything, and everybody else, well, everybody else is just going to hell, right? It is not enough not to be a racist. It is not enough not to be a racist. Non-racist is not the goal. Being non-racist does nothing to address racism.
Rich, who again is a fairly liberal columnist, and wrote a piece, I think it was in the New York Times, right after or right before the election, where he said that, basically racism is not a problem anymore because when white folks get to know black folks, well, their biases and their fears subside. Now, number one, I'm not sure that's true. But secondly, even if it were true, the truth is, given the history of racism, spatial segregation, residential isolation, the fact that 85% of white folks live in communities with virtually no people of color around, even if he were right, it wouldn't matter because most white folks won't get that opportunity to actually form close, intimate friendships or connections with people of color. And unfortunately, if it isn't happening, the only way we get to know folks of color is via media. So maybe we see Barack Obama on television coming into our living rooms every night. And over an 18-month to 2-year period, we're able to say, yeah, I sort of like that guy. He seems really capable and really bright. Maybe I wasn't sure at first, but given 2 years, he was able to overcome, maybe my first impression. But the only other folks we're seeing in the media are either folks who are sort of superstars on the one hand, or criminals on the other hand. Those are the black folks we typically see on TV. They're either like mega millionaire athletes or entertainers, or they're the folks doing a perp walk on the 6 o'clock news that the cops have just gone arrested and haven't even let them put a shirt on before cuffing them and bringing them out in front of the cameras. If the only people you see regularly are superstar millionaires and thugs, for the average person, they can't relate to either of those, right? The average person of color can't, and the average white person can't either. The superstar, you're likely to envy their position, and the thug you're afraid of. And envy and fear are not particularly good human emotions upon which to base some personal connections or intimate relationships. So I think that's what we're dealing with. Barack Obama or Bill Cosby or Oprah Winfrey or a handful of people of color, we're able to get to know them, or at least we think we know them, via media. But for average everyday white folks and for average everyday black and brown folks, the ability to really get to know each other and overcome those implicit biases is a lot more rare.
White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present.
There was a real fear that if you let blacks get control, everything would change. And there was with some people, there was no idea that there would be any fairness or any democracy or anything, that there would be a decent, well-run city government, county government, whatever. It was like, if this happens, we're lost. And it was just a terrible fear. Southerners are like any other group of people. I mean, there are all kinds of folks that are included, and regardless of where they stood on integration or anything else, there were a lot of really good people who made wrong decisions and not so much did wrong things as failed to do right things. And when you look back on it, try to sort it out and figure out what could have been different. I think one of the things is that people felt a sense of being powerless. Maybe people who would have been willing to go along and go further and move forward sooner wouldn't have had any notion of any way that they could impact this, or that anything that they could personally do that would be helpful. You know, even as now, most of us live in a society that we think is far from perfect, and yet between now and 2 weeks from now, we're probably not going to do very much to change it, partly because we have no sense of what we could do. And in the South, it was that way. Even people who were willing to take risk and move out were just not able to visualize what kinds of things could help. Or, you know, how would you get enough people, if everybody that was willing to go to a certain step would move at once, then it would be accomplished. But we were all scattered out there. Nobody knew who else was willing to do what or make what changes. And there was not a lot of leadership. And leadership in the churches was, a lot of it was really forward-thinking and helpful, and then a lot of it was people who knew what the right thing to do was but were terrified of taking any stand that would upset the congregation. There were people in the churches who wanted to keep the peace in the local church, you know, in the congregation, and so they didn't want to do anything that might cause any kind of dissension. Politicians, even people who knew better, who would have been willing to go further personally or to have the state move forward, were always bound by fear of not getting reelected. And so really people who knew better just stuck with racism for political reasons, is what I think. You know, it was, but a lot of it just in average citizens was just that people didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to help. There still are a lot of strange myths floating around in the South. There were a lot of strange tales from Reconstruction. There's an awful lot of fiction that floats about, and so I have no idea what kind of weird notions people had, but mostly I think it is of losing control. You know, I mean, there was some higher level of trust, even of dishonest or corrupt white politicians, than of a black in some position of authority over you, for people who had grown up with these myths and fears, so that it was easier to stick with somebody that you might not have even cared for who was white. I know that there were people who actually became physically ill every time there was any big desegregation news. I mean, you could just count on it. If you went to their house, you knew they were going to be in bed. It really just was. This was after I was a grown woman, and it was pretty startling to me to discover that there were people that had that kind of, that were bound in that way to racism. But of course, there are people who are a lot worse that I didn't happen to know personally. For me, there's a lot of guilt that's involved, because growing up, if you grow up and accept things the way they are, then you have to wonder, you know, why did you accept all of this? Why did you not question more? Or, you know, why didn't you think about all these things that were happening? And I don't know what the answer to that is. My great-grandfather was a really good man, but he was really racist also. He, I guess, was influenced a lot by things that happened during Reconstruction. And he was never a violent person, nor was he. It wasn't something that he spent a lot of time thinking about or talking about, but his views were, I remember, mainly his never quite forgiving the Methodist Church for reuniting. You know, there was a Southern Methodist Church for a while, and he didn't think they should have gone back in with the Northern Methodist Church. There were a lot of really good people who were and are racist, and I don't know how you explain or justify, or a lot of people wouldn't even accept the fact that you can be both, but in my belief you can. For instance, there were a lot of people who were willing to accept when Emmett Till was murdered There were people who were willing to accept the fact that this was, I don't remember if they said it was a prank or what, but I mean there were stories that this didn't really happen before they found the body, and there were people who were willing to accept that. There were the same kind of attitude was with almost everything, where there was not an immediate finding of a body. There was always this thing, this is something somebody's made up, just a lot of denial. A lot of people who didn't want to believe that this sort of thing would happen and would refuse to accept the fact that it was happening. I think there were a lot of people who did think it would be stopped, who never thought the change would actually happen, even after it was happening. And I think if there had not been that attitude, if people had known the change was going to happen anyhow, maybe it would have been faster. Maybe the holding the line would not have been so long and painful. But I think that part of the reason that there was not more change is just that people never did accept it as the reality of the day.
Welcome back. Now, when I said earlier, without fear, there is no white supremacy. And I've seen white people here sharing why they fear black people. And from my own perspective, I've decided to dig in a little bit deeper so that we can understand really for the people who are not understanding, or like for Africans. I know black Americans, all these things. So I'm just sharing you the videos, and then I dig deep a little more to see why white people fear black people is from the legacy of slavery and colonization. The history of slavery in the USA and colonization in part of the world created a foundation of systematic racism and that continues to impact societies up to today. White people, particularly in the context of, in the USA, were historically taught to see black people as inferior. And it is like normality to them. Like when they see black people, there is fear that is generated from them to them. And this is automatically, they were taught, they were brainwashed, if I may use that word. Sorry to use the word, but it is like a brainwashing that when you see a black person is inferior and human or less deserving the rights and opportunities. So even if you are going to look for opportunities, a job, when you go to a white company, they will see you as subhuman. They will see you as inferior. They will see you as like you don't deserve rights and opportunities to that work. So that's how they were taught. And I get it that right now, a lot of white people knows the truth. But again, some of them are passing this to generation of their kids to their kids. And that's why it is an ending situation. And this was built into legal system, social norms, and cultural attitudes that dehumanized black folks. Now, segregation too played a part. The Jim Crow law, after slavery ended in the USA, black people were still segregated and denied basic rights like the right to vote, equal education, access to health, ability to own property, etc., etc. And this is something that made colonization or made slavery to succeed. The fear between these two races. And the fear made a white person to see a black person as a slavery. I fear when this man get hands on me or on my property, he will be like this. So what do? Let's make him a slave. And by making him a slave, we will restrict his movement. We will minimal food. We will restrict everything that he's doing. So the fear was created by legacy of colonization and slavery. And of course, when we talk about the fear between white people and black people, we never cease to talk about stereotypes of the media. Media has played a bigger role in this propaganda or in this idea of fear. The media is like a tool that burns each and every corner. Because one of the most significant ways or fear is perpetuated is through stereotypes. You know, when you see a black person, you see this one. When you see a Latino, you see this one. So, like, it's a criminal, it's a gang member, they are violent, especially, their culture, their pop music culture is like this. So the media is circulating the information which are wrong, the stereotypes. Now, whenever you see all black people trying to do this, you think he's trying to reach on the gun. And let me tell you, gun owning in the United States of America, even the wise people, white kids own guns. I have seen documentaries and videos where there is things, criminals is being done by the white people. But the media cannot send this message that white people, they own guns, they are part of criminals. The media cannot circulate this information, but they only circulate information of black people, Latino, Mexican, Cuban, in short, the people of color. They only circulate their stereotypes, and this is what is making the fear to go deep and deeper. So when a white person sees a black person and they listen to the media or to the television that is like this and like that, so he is getting to fear this black person even if he doesn't know who he is. They have never met. He don't know his agenda. Everyone is in his own way. When a black person goes to a supermarket, or when a black person goes to grain stores, or, he's being followed around, like, they are watching. And white people, sometimes they get free escort, free bodyguards. You are shopping and someone is just following you behind, because there is a stereotype that black folks are thieves. So this white guy is here to see or to protect their property. He fears that you may steal something from the grocery store, or you may steal something from the fashion store. So they are following you up and down. That's the kind of fear we're talking about. And that is because of the media stereotypes, how media send the information. So media representation plays a key role in shaping the society perceptions. And in the USA, for decades, black people were underrepresented or portrayed negatively in film, TV, and news. When we see these films, this news, the movies, how they portray black people is how the society will carry black people. And that's why black people are going through racism, discrimination in the society, is because our kids are seeing it on television. And now when a white kid sees a black person, he fears, and he's just a kid, because he have seen on the film that a criminal on that film, a smuggler in that film is a black person. So he just fears. He may even ask the parent, this is a drug dealer. Because how we are being portrayed on the TVs, the news, film, it's just disgusting. So when black people are portrayed, it was often the roles to emphasize criminality, poverty, aggression. They portray us in a poverty way, like how they portray Africa. See how they portray all of Africa. They even doesn't care that Africa has 54 states, countries. They even doesn't care that South Africa is rich, Kenya is rich. They even doesn't care Ghana, Nigeria are doing okay. They even doesn't care that there's no war in Tanzania. All they will say is Africa is having war, simply because there's war in Congo. They will put this in one bucket and make it to be like all of Africa is like that. So the media representation, the stereotypes played a lot. Now, when the only images of the story of a person has about a group of people are negative or biased, this can lead to fear or discomfort when they encounter that group in real life. So if someone grows up more exposure to black individuals on film, like negatively, when he meet them or when she meet them, automatically he fear them. It's called fear of the unknown. And that's what's going on, And why another fear that white people fear black people is when they fear to lose. They fear to lose the power, economic power. They fear that. And that's why we have some economic inequalities. They fear economic competition, In societies which pronounce economic inequality, some white people may perceive black people as economic competitors. And that's what they fear. Period. That's what they fear. They fear competition from the black people. This can be especially true in areas where economic resources are limited. Fear can arise from the belief that if black people succeed or gain more power, it will come at the expense of white people. And they think of how the ancestors did to black people, and they be like, if this guy got to power, oh my goodness, we can't survive. We can't survive. That's what they think, The civil rights movement and ongoing discussion around racial justice challenge entrenched power structures. So for some white people, this shift can create anxiety, as it means they may lose some of the privileges they have historically enjoyed, the white privileges. This fear of losing privileges can manifest as fear towards black people, even though those people may not be actively threatening anyone's status. So they just fear to lose their privileges. And I may say, as I conclude, this fear that some white people have towards black people is a multifaceted issues shaped by history, society influence, psychology, and personal experience. Overcoming these fears requires addressing systematic racism, challenging harmful stereotypes, promoting education and awareness, and encouraging open, respectful dialogue between racial groups. It is important for that, okay? So the fear to lose the privilege is what drives white people to fear black people. But in real sense, when we come to fear, is white people or black people are the one who's supposed to fear black people. Of course, we fear the racism, we fear the harsh words, we fear the discrimination, we fear the police brutality, we fear how people are gonna talk when they see us around walking as black people. Just fear. So in real sense, black people are the one who fear white people, but this information, or it can't be agreed. It can't be agreed. Okay? Tell me what you think on the comment section about this video. Until next episode, peace out.